There's a moment in The Boys Season 5 that almost everyone missed. A single look from Butcher that I swear is the writers quietly telling us exactly how his story ends. And no, I'm not talking about the theory that becomes the final villain, because let's face it, Butcher's been a villain for a long time now. What I'm talking about is something that reframes every hallucination, every choice, every moment of hate that has driven him. So let's unpack Butcher and how his final fate has already been spelled out right in front of us. When we first met Butcher, it was easy to mistake him for what us fellow Brits call a lovable rogue, a cheeky chappy. He might get into a fight on match day, but he'll buy you a pint afterwards. But before long, the show starts dismantling this illusion. Butcher may have the charm, nail the one-liners, but they are a surface-level distraction for someone who is completely driven by hate. We often forgive him because the rage is directed at Vought and Homelander, the ultimate baddies of the show. But at what cost? Butcher doesn't just want to bring certain soups to justice, he wants to destroy all soups. The Boys loves to make us question what makes a hero and what makes a villain. And just because you're set on taking down Homelander, it doesn't make you one of the good guys. Butcher's path seems to have been forged by losing Becca, but even that wasn't as clear as it seems. Butcher knew what Homelander had done to Becca, but he didn't know what happened after she left that park bench. Becca wasn't just Butcher's strength, she was the only person that loved him. When he believed that she died, he didn't just lose her, he lost the version of himself that she believed existed, and he's been punishing the world for that loss ever since. Butcher never processed this, he learnt to outrun it, and instead he focused on his hate for Homelander, because that hate was easier to handle than the grief. This hate was the thing that was giving him purpose, a mission to focus on. And you could argue that these feelings are justifiable, right? He lost his wife due to her being the subject of a brutal attack. Butcher didn't grow up in a loving household, and Becca was the person who made him feel loved. And possibly the waitress he cheated on her with. Seriously, Butcher, sometimes it's really hard to justify your actions. Well, let's face it, Butcher was never perfect, and in reality, the rage was rooted inside him way before Becca was taken from him. The hate didn't come from nowhere. It was a horrific melting pot of guilt over Lenny, unresolved trauma from his dad, a sprinkle of PTSD from the SAS, and grief from Becca. Butcher had every right to be angry, to be hurt, but instead of handling these emotions, he just bottled it up and let the rage consume him. And this is exactly why, when Becca needed him the most, she didn't go to him for help. She went to Vought. She left Butcher, the love of her life, because she knew him. She knew exactly how he'd react, exactly how far he'd go. And she was right. Because after he lost her again, he didn't know how to let go of his rage because this would mean dealing with the fact that he'd lost her all over again. So instead of making up to her, he betrays her. He couldn't honour her dying wish because he didn't value this as highly as much as taking down Homelander. He didn't save Ryan. Instead, he let him down time and time again. And I would argue he causes more damage to Ryan than Homelander ever did. And if you want a full breakdown on this, and how Ryan is more important than we think, then be sure to subscribe as I've got a video on that coming. But what do you guys think? Do you think Ryan and Butcher's relationship could end well? Could they reconcile? Personally, at this point, I kind of think Ryan is better off without Butcher. Because early on, you sometimes see the regret in Butcher's eyes when he lets down Ryan. But by season 5, he doesn't even seem to care about Ryan anymore. He cares about losing his biggest weapon. Because with Butcher, hate always wins, even over the people he claims to care about. Because let's face it, there have been multiple times where people that Butcher cares about have needed him, and yet he still can't be distracted from his pursuit against Homelander, even when it comes to Huey. Huey was Butcher's chance of making up with what happened to Lenny. Huey was the person he made his dying call to, yet he's still just seen him as another pawn. When Starlight told Butcher that Temp V was killing them, he hid this from Huey and still let him take it. The truth is simple. Butcher doesn't have people, he has weapons. I would love to know what you guys think is the worst thing that Butcher did. Please let me know below. When Temp V started killing him, we started to get insight into the inner conflict of Butcher's mind. Becca represented the last flicker of humanity, the part of him capable of empathy, restraint, connection, the one telling him not to give up on himself or others, the one reminding him that there was someone there to love. Kessler, on the other hand, represented the rot, the part of him that wants to watch the world burn. The hallucinations weren't random. Becca tries to pull him back towards humanity, and Kessler tries to drag him deeper into the darkness. And Butcher, he chooses Kessler. And why did he do that? Because he feared Ryan becoming his dad almost as much as he feared becoming his own dad. He convinced himself Ryan is past saving, when in reality, it's not Ryan who was past saving, it's Butcher. His powers are the symbolic embodiment of this. Yes, some of his powers, like the eye lasers, mimic Homelander. Not because he was obsessed with Homelander, but because in reality, he's just another version of Homelander that was subject to growing up in different circumstances. The worms burying around his body shows what hate does when you let it take root. It eats you alive from the inside out. By season 5, Butcher isn't just his usual revenge-driven self. He's an emptier version. He doesn't even pretend to care about people anymore. Ryan, the last part of Becca, breaks in front of him, and he couldn't care less. At this point, Butcher's just been completely hollowed out, leading us to question, how much of Butcher is even left? And how much is all Kessler? Fort Harmony is one of the most important sequences in the entire season, not because of what happens, and not because it's just trying to make us watch the prequel, but because of what it represents. When the boys go to Fort Harmony, the anger starts bubbling to the surface. They almost tear each other apart. And this is where we meet Quinn, a person that's become toxic vines wrapping around Fort Harmony. Quinn is basically a walking metaphor for the way hate spreads like a virus. Well, maybe walking was the wrong term here. Quinn infected people with the same thing that was killing Butcher from the inside. Hate spreads, multiplies, eats away the person underneath. We see the effect Quinn has on Huey, Kamiko, MM. And Butcher, he kind of doesn't seem that different to normal season 5 Butcher. Not because he's strong, and not because he has altered brain chemistry like Frenchie, but because he's already like that. He's already living in the emotional state that Quinn forces onto others. So after Soldier Boy kills Quinn and breaks down, Butcher almost has a look of empathy, but then it changes to that glare that we usually see when Kessler comes out, and that's when the theory clicks. You see, we know almost nothing about Quinn's backstory, other than, judging by Soldier Boy's reaction, it's safe to say he didn't appear to be the warmest of characters. We don't know what version of V Quinn was exposed to. We don't know how his powers developed, and we don't know what turned him into a toxic plant. But we do know this. Quinn spreads the exact same thing that's been consuming Butcher. The biggest fan theory is that Huey kills Butcher like the comics. And maybe he does. But do we really want Huey's final act to be murder? The character who occasionally makes mistakes but constantly tries to put himself back to goodness. Do we really want that for him? And that leads to the alternative. What if Butcher doesn't get killed by Huey at all? What if Butcher, in effect, becomes Quinn? What if the worms in him are like Quinn's vines? Go back to that look. That wasn't Butcher, that was Kessler. What does any virus want to do? Spread. And that was the moment Kessler realised another way in which he could replicate. So did Quinn's fate foreshadow Butcher's? Well, I think it did. Because one of the themes of The Boys has been about what hate does to people, how it corrodes, how it isolates, how it spreads. Butcher isn't a tragic hero, he's a cautionary tale. A man who let hate become his identity until there was nothing left but the hate itself. And if the writers are really showing us his ending, then the most heartbreaking part isn't that Butcher dies. It's that he'll die by succumbing to his own hate. And the worst part is, he'll go willingly. Because somewhere deep down, he believes that is all he deserves. But what do you guys think? Do you see a different ending? Do you still think Butcher can be redeemed? Let me know your thoughts below. And as always, I'll see you next time.